Welcome back to Coffeesodes, where we like to brew up knowledge one sip at a time. This is our 8th episode, and today we are diving deep into something pretty fascinating, the connection between the gut microbiome and obesity.
Yeah, it's such a hot topic in research right now, and for good reason.
Definitely. But before we go any further, just a quick reminder that this is for informational purposes only and not a substitute for medical advice. And if you're ready to get really into it, we've linked the full research paper in the episode description.
Yeah, those primary sources are always a good idea.
Always. So let's get started with the basics. What exactly is the gut microbiome?
Well, you can think of it like a city, a bustling city, but instead of people, it's packed with trillions of bacteria and viruses and fungi, all making their home in your gut.
Trillions. That's like more than all the stars in the Milky Way, right?
He really is a crazy number, and the really wild part is that all of that contains up to 100 times more genes than our own human genome.
Wait 100 times. So we're basically just walking ecosystems. Why is all of that so important for our health, though?
Well, because this community is actually really busy. They do all kinds of important things for us, like helping us break down our food or synthesize vitamins, and even training our immune system.
So it's like this whole team of little microscopic helpers working behind the scenes.
Exactly. But this is where it gets really interesting, especially for today's topic. The gut microbiome has a huge influence on our metabolism and how our body regulates weight.
Okay, I'm listening. We all know about the obesity epidemic, right? So how does the gut microbiome play into that?
Well, scientists have actually shown a direct link. They raised some mice in sterile environments, so they had absolutely no gut bacteria. We call them germ-free mice.
So like the ultimate clean freaks of the rodent world.
Exactly. And these mice were much leaner than the mice that had a normal gut microbiome.
Hold on. You're telling me that having a gut microbiome makes you more likely to gain weight? That doesn't make sense.
I know, right? It was a big deal when scientists first found this out, but they didn't stop there. They took it a step further and transplanted gut bacteria from regular mice into these germ-free mice.
What happened?
Their body fat just went through the roof, even without any changes to their diet. It was undeniable proof that these bacteria in our gut play a big role in how our body regulates weight.
Wow, okay. So if our gut bacteria can affect our weight that much, can we do anything to affect them?
That's what everyone's trying to figure out right now, and one of the biggest tools we have is our diet.
You are what you eat, right? Even down to the microbes. So let's say I want a healthy gut microbiome for weight management. What should I be eating?
Well, researchers have been looking at populations around the world that eat really different diets to try and get some clues,
Right.
like the Hadza tribe in Tanzania. They eat a mostly plant-based diet, they have very low rates of obesity, and they have super diverse gut microbiome.
What do you mean by diverse? Like they just have a lot of different types of bacteria.
Exactly. It's like comparing a rainforest to just a field of corn. Then you have groups like the Inuit up in the Canadian Arctic. Their traditional diet is high in animal fats and protein. Their gut microbiome is a lot less diverse. Actually, it's more similar to what we see in Western populations. And they also have higher obesity rates.
So it seems like a more diverse diet means a more diverse gut microbiome. But how does all that actually lead to weight gain or loss?
Well, it depends on the types of bacteria that like to eat certain foods. For example, a high-fiber diet, especially one that's rich in prebiotics, like inulin. That acts like a feast for the good bacteria, like lactobacillus and bifidobacterium.
Those are the good guys, right?
Right. They're linked to all sorts of benefits: better digestion, less inflammation, and even weight loss. On the other hand, diets that are high in fat, especially saturated fats, those can actually encourage the harmful bacteria to grow. And that can lead to something called dysbiosis.
Dysbiosis. That
Well,
doesn't sound good.
It's not. It basically means that the ecosystem in your gut is out of balance. The bad bacteria start to outnumber the good bacteria, and that imbalance is strongly linked to inflammation and weight gain.
So it's not just about how many calories you eat, it's about what your microbes are eating too.
Exactly.
So what about all the fermented foods that are trendy these days, like yogurt and kimchi and sauerkraut? Are those really as good as everyone says they are?
Well, they definitely have their benefits. Those foods are full of probiotics, which are live bacteria that can actually help to restore balance to your gut microbiome.
So it's like sending in reinforcements.
Exactly. And a healthy, balanced gut microbiome is super important for maintaining a healthy weight.
Interesting. So we've talked a lot about how what we eat affects our gut microbiome. But are there other things that play a role, like things we can't control as much?
Oh, absolutely. One thing that researchers are really starting to look at is how babies are born. Babies that are delivered by C-section, they tend to have different gut microbiomes than babies that are born vaginally.
Really? Never thought about that. Does that have any long-term effects?
There's some research that suggests it might. There could be a link between being born by C-section and having a higher risk of obesity later in life, but we need more research to know for sure.
So even how we're brought into the world can affect our gut health. What about things like taking antibiotics? I mean, I know they're important for fighting infections, but could they be messing with our gut bacteria?
I hate to say it, but yes. Antibiotics are really important for treating those bacterial infections, but they can also kill off the good bacteria in your gut, and that can cause those imbalances we were talking about. Some studies have even shown that when kids take antibiotics, it could increase their risk of obesity later on.
Wow. It seems like our gut microbiome is affected by so many different things, from the moment we're born to the food we eat. So for someone listening to this and thinking, okay, I want to support my gut health and maybe even lose weight, what's the most important thing to remember?
Well, the big takeaway is that supporting your gut health is a crucial part of taking care of your overall health. And a big part of that is focusing on eating a diverse diet with lots of fiber, being mindful of when you take antibiotics, and maybe even thinking about adding some fermented foods or probiotic supplements to your routine.
So basically be proactive and make choices that help your gut microbiome to thrive. You mentioned specific types of bacteria earlier, like lactobacillus. Are there any other important players in the gut microbiome when it comes to weight?
Yeah, there are a few key players that researchers have been focusing on. For a long time, everyone was looking at the ratio of two main types of bacteria, firmicutes and bacteroidetes. The idea was that if you had more firmicutes, then you were more likely to be obese.
So like the firmicutes are trying to make us gain weight.
That was the thought. But as we learn more, we're realizing it's a lot more complicated than that. The gut microbiome is just so complex, and just looking at one ratio doesn't give us the whole picture.
So it's not as simple as good bacteria versus bad bacteria.
Nope. We're moving past that oversimplified idea.
Okay, so who are some of the all-star bacteria that are getting a lot of attention?
Well, one that's been making a splash is Prevotella. This type of bacteria has been linked to weight loss in people who eat a lot of whole grains. Another really interesting one is Akkermansia mucinifera. It's associated with having a lower BMI, better metabolic health, and it has a lot of potential for helping people manage their weight.
Akkermansia mucinifera. That's a mouthful, but it sounds like you want that one on your team. What makes it so special?
Well, the cool thing about Akkermansia is that it actually eats the mucus layer that lines our gut, which helps make that barrier stronger. And when your gut barrier is strong, it prevents leaky gut, which is when undigested food and toxins can leak into your bloodstream, and that triggers inflammation.
So it's like reinforcing the walls of your gut to keep everything running smoothly.
Exactly. And research has also shown that Akkermansia can improve your insulin sensitivity and reduce inflammation, which can all contribute to a healthier weight.
Okay, so Prevotella and Akkermansia are definitely two to keep an eye on. Any other rising stars we should know about?
There's Christensenella minuta. It seems to be really good at preventing weight gain, and it helps to regulate how our body processes fats. It's still a pretty new area of research, but the findings are looking really promising.
Wow, so many potential allies living in our gut.
Yeah,
Seems like we're only just starting to understand the gut microbiome and how it's all connected to obesity.
absolutely. It's such an exciting field, and new discoveries are happening all the time.
It's amazing to think that these tiny organisms could be the key to solving something as big as obesity.
I know, right? And it goes way beyond weight, too. Understanding and taking care of our gut microbiome could have huge implications for our overall health, from lowering our risk of chronic diseases to even improving our mental well-being.
Okay, so before we move on to the next part of our deep dive, I'm curious about other lifestyle factors. Can things like exercise or stress affect our gut bacteria too?
They absolutely can. Physical activity has actually been shown to promote a more diverse and healthy gut microbiome. Studies have even found that athletes tend to have higher levels of that beneficial Akkermansia we were just talking about.
So hitting the gym is good for your gut and your muscles. Win-win.
For sure. And on the other side of that coin, chronic stress can actually disrupt the balance of our gut microbiome, which can lead to an increase in those harmful bacteria.
Figures. Stress seems to mess with just about everything.
It really does. It all comes down to balance. When we're stressed, our bodies release hormones like cortisol, and that can really throw off our gut bacteria. which then impacts our digestion, our immune system, and even our mood.
So managing stress is also a key part of supporting a healthy gut.
Absolutely. It's all interconnected. Our mental and physical health are completely tied to the health of our gut microbiome.
This has been a really fascinating look at the gut microbiome and its connection to obesity. We've learned that it's this complex and dynamic ecosystem that plays a huge role in our health,
Yeah.
and that we actually have more power to influence it than we might think.
Exactly. We're not just along for the ride. We can shape our gut microbiome through the choices we make about our diet and lifestyle.
It's empowering to know that we can take control of our gut health. But before we get too excited about all the amazing things we can do, I have to ask about all the hype around probiotics. Are they really the miracle cure that everyone's making them out to be? Or is there more to the story?
That's a great question, and it's one I get a lot. Yeah, it is a great question. It seems like everyone's jumping on the probiotic bandwagon these days.
It really does.
And I get it. The idea of taking a pill to repopulate your gut with good bacteria, it sounds pretty appealing. But it's actually more complicated than that.
Okay, so let's break that down. What's the real deal with probiotics?
Well, first, you have to remember that the world of probiotics is huge. There are tons of different strains of bacteria out there, and each one has its own unique properties and benefits.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
Definitely not. The strains that might help with weight loss could be completely different from the ones that help with digestion or immune function.
So how are you supposed to know which ones are right for you?
That's the tricky part. The research on probiotics is still pretty new, and there's no easy answer. Some studies have shown some really promising results for certain strains, especially in specific groups of people. But other studies haven't found any effect at all.
So is it kind of a gamble?
I guess you could say that. It's like throwing a bunch of seeds in your garden and hoping that something grows. You might get lucky and see some positive changes, but there's no guarantee. And another thing to keep in mind is that the effects of probiotics are often temporary.
So they don't really stick around once you stop taking them.
Exactly. Unlike the bacteria that naturally live in our gut, probiotics are more like temporary visitors. They might hang out for a little while, but they don't necessarily move in for good.
So what's the bottom line on probiotics? Should we be taking them or not?
I think the best way to think about probiotics is as something that can complement a healthy lifestyle, not as a magic solution.
So they might be helpful, but they're not going to replace eating a balanced diet, exercising, and all the other good stuff we've been talking about.
Exactly. Focus on building a healthy foundation for your gut microbiome through your everyday choices. And then you can think about adding probiotics as an extra tool.
That makes sense. Well, we've covered a lot of ground here, from just how many bacteria are living in our gut to the power of our diet and lifestyle choices. As we wrap up this deep dive, what are the main things you want listeners to take away from this conversation?
I think the most important thing to remember is that your gut microbiome is incredibly powerful. It plays a huge role in shaping your overall health, and especially when it comes to your weight and your metabolism.
It's not just about willpower or counting calories. There's a whole ecosystem at work.
Exactly. And the second thing is that the choices you make every single day, from what you eat to how much you exercise, all of that plays a huge role in shaping that ecosystem.
So we have more control than we think.
Absolutely. And lastly, some specific bacteria like Prevotella and Akkermansia mucinifila, they're showing some really promising potential for future weight management strategies. It's a super exciting area of research, and I think we're just starting to scratch the surface of what's possible with the gut microbiome.
It's pretty amazing to think that we might be able to manipulate our gut bacteria one day to help us reach a healthy weight.
It is, and it's not just about weight either. Understanding and taking care of our gut microbiome could have ripple effects on our overall health, from reducing inflammation to even improving our mental well-being.
It really is like a whole new world of health that we're discovering.
It is, and the more we learn, the more we realize just how connected everything really is. Our gut isn't just some isolated organ. It's in constant communication with our brain, our immune system, pretty much every other system in our body.
So when we talk about gut health, we're actually talking about whole body health.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why taking a holistic approach is so important. We have to think about how what we eat, our stress levels, our sleep habits, even our social connections, all of that can have an impact on those trillions of little residents living in our gut.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I know I've learned a lot, and I hope our listeners have too.
Me too. It's always fun to talk about this stuff.
So before we sign off, is there a final thought-provoking question you want to leave our listeners with? Something for them to ponder over their next cup of coffee as they think about all this amazing information.
That's a good one. How about this? Given how closely connected our gut and our brain are, could manipulating our microbiome actually have an impact on our mental health? Something to chew on both literally and figuratively.
Ooh, that's a good one. I'm going to be thinking about that. And to our listeners, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those coffees brewing.